Hello friends, welcome to the Soviet Journey channel. At this station of our journey, I would like to give you detailed information about the historical process of the Sovietization movement established in Azerbaijan in 1920. I think that the founding process of the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic will attract the attention of both friends who are interested in Soviet history and who love history in general. The Sovietization of Azerbaijan is a historical event that resulted in the Azerbaijan Soviet replacing the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, which was established in 1918. This process is also called the Baku Operation or April Revolution. The Sovietization movement of Azerbaijan was carried out with the joint coordination of Russia and Azerbaijani Bolsheviks, with the aim of overthrowing the former Musavat government and establishing Soviet power in the country. In addition, the 11th Red Army units, which fought against the White Army on the Caucasian front in the Russian Civil War, played a key role in the Sovietization of Azerbaijan. The 11th Red Army similarly took part in the Sovietization of other republics in the South Caucasus in 1920 to 1921. The Sovietization plan of Azerbaijan was mainly developed by Mikhail Tukhachevsky, leader of the Azerbaijan Communist Party and commander of the Caucasian Front in the Russian Civil War, and Sergei Orkonakidze, a member of the Revolutionary Military Council. Before this process, there were conflicting internal political conflicts in Azerbaijan, which experienced a deep political and socio-economic crisis between 1919 and 1920. There were armed conflicts between various political and social groups in many parts of the country. After the defeat of the Baku Commune between 25 April and July 31, 1918, various socialist parties and organizations were still politically active. These groups united under the name of the Azerbaijan Communist Party Bolshevik in February 1921. Having defeated the White Army in the North Caucasus in April 1920, the 11th Red Army units approached the Azerbaijani border. At that time, the Azerbaijani Bolsheviks were preparing for the armed uprising that started on the night of April 26th to 27th. Parallel to the uprising in Baku, a group of Soviet armored trains crossed the border into Azerbaijan, where they united with the Azerbaijani Bolsheviks and began to advance together. The Bolsheviks, who seized power in the capital Baku, called on the former government and parliament of Azerbaijan to hand over power to the Bolsheviks. The former parliament held an emergency meeting and voted to transfer power to the Azerbaijan Communist Party. Then, with the support of the 11th Red Army units entering the country, the Bolsheviks took control of all regions of Azerbaijan in a short time. After these events, the Soviet government was established in Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic was established. It joined the Union in 1922 as a founding member of the Soviet Union. Yes, friends, I gave you a brief summary of the Sovietization of Azerbaijan in this introduction. Now, let's take a detailed look at the developments in this historical process and refresh our memory about the period. On April 25, 1918, the Soviet Republic known as the Baku Soviet was declared with its center in Baku. This Soviet power in Baku was overthrown in July 1918, and the region was occupied by the Caucasian Islamic Army in September. Then the city became the capital of the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic. However, many socialist parties and organizations such as Himmet and Adalet were still actively operating. After being removed from power, the new government increased its oppression and massacres against socialists. During the capture of Baku between August and September 1918 alone, approximately 100 Justice Party members were killed and 95 of them were imprisoned. The Himmet Party was almost completely destroyed after the Baku Soviet until it began to recover in late 1918. In December 1918, workers' organizations united under the name Baku Workers' Conference, which soon became the highest representative body of Baku workers. Soviet administrators Anastas Mikoyan and Sergei Kirov, who would assume important positions in the future, described this structure established at that time as a kind of Soviet and a workers' parliament. During this period, there was a huge struggle between the Bolsheviks, Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries. According to the Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries, this workers' conference should deal with issues related to workers' wages and living conditions, and the political struggle should be carried out in the parliament. The Bolsheviks argued that the conference had a directly political aspect. Later, the Bolsheviks established the Council of Workers, Soldiers and Peasants' Deputies, which was approved at a meeting of the Workers' Conference on January 22, 1919. In March 1920, the leadership of the Workers' Conference passed to the Bolsheviks, and this body became the highest political body of the Baku workers. In the spring of 1919, the Bolsheviks established a Soviet republic in the area of the cities of Mugan and Lankaran. At that time, this was the only place in Transcaucasia where Soviet power existed. This socialist republic, which ruled from May 15, 1918 to July 23, 1919, was attacked by both Azerbaijani troops and former Tsarist troops. Then the sovereignty of the Mugan Soviet Republic was ended. British seaplanes and warships also participated in the attack. During the years of existence of the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, the Bolsheviks published many newspapers. Many newspapers, such as Voice of the Poor, Communist, Hammer, Proletarian, Workers' Way, Voice of Labour, Freedom, Azerbaijan Purs, were the voice of the Azerbaijani working class at that time. A large number of socialists, including those who sympathised with the Bolsheviks, worked in state institutions and law enforcement agencies. For example, Cengiz Yildirim and Alihayder Karayev, who would later assume important roles in Azerbaijani and Soviet history, held important positions such as port chief and deputy navy commander. During this period, there were generally two ideas among socialists in Azerbaijan. First, an independent Soviet republic should have been established in Azerbaijan, and second, there was no need for a republic and Azerbaijan should have been divided into provinces and joined the Russian Soviet as autonomous states. When this issue was conveyed to Lenin, Lenin stated that the Bolsheviks should be party to the establishment of an independent republic, that the other view was colonialism and even stupidity, and in this respect, he stated that the newly established Soviet Azerbaijan should be an example for other. At the end of 1919 and the beginning of 1920, there was a deep political and socio-economic crisis in Azerbaijan. The economic devastation caused by the First World War and the severance of economic relations with Russia put the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic in a difficult situation. There were protests by villagers in many regions. The economy was collapsing, and the oil industry was truly disastrous. Only 18 of 40 oil refineries were operating in the country. No one wanted to work in the oil industry because of its harsh conditions. The communist newspaper, which was published at that time, described the oil fields at that time as cemeteries. At the Second Congress of the Musavat Party, leader Memdiman Resulsaid stated that oil field workers would be specifically supported by the government due to the crisis in the oil industry. Compared to the PRE World War I level, in 1920 there was a decrease of 40% in agricultural products, 99% in cotton cultivation area, 30% in vineyards, and 70% in general livestock production. The irrigation system in the fields was also in disrepair. What made the situation unstable was not only the conflict between rich and poor, which led to social tension, but also the struggle of the working class to improve their economic and social situation. During this period, all legal labor organizations were destroyed, especially in Baku. The hungry workers were working 17-18 hours a day, and almost all of them complained that daily life had become unbearable because they could be fired at any time. In September 1919, the number of unemployed people in Baku alone had reached 30,000 people. In October 1919, the wages of Baku oil workers had fallen dramatically. At the same time, the prices of goods had increased greatly. For example, in the second half of 1919, bread prices increased by 100, meat by 56, fish by 150, eggs by 96, butter by 200, linen materials by 100, woolen fabrics by 233%, and shoe prices by 135%. As can be seen from the numbers, the cost of living had reached unbearable levels and the wages received by workers had gradually decreased. The economic blockade implemented by White Army commander Anton Denikin at the end of 1919 also contributed greatly to the deepening of the food crisis. Denikin had announced that he would not allow food to enter the Georgian and Azerbaijani Soviet states because they were emerging as detrimental to the Russian state. Thus, many people had to struggle with hunger. On the other hand, armed conflicts began to occur at a high rate. In the countryside, peasants were seizing the lands of landowners. The peasant movement in Azerbaijan reached a much larger size under the leadership of Kara Mehmet, who worked with the Bolsheviks in the countryside. The villagers burned the houses of the rich, confiscated their property, and those who resisted, the rich lords, were killed. A group of about 600 peasants headed by Kara Mehmet surrounded Ganja on March 20, 1919, and upon the peasants' request, Governor Vekalov was forced to resign. This rebellion is one of the reasons for the collapse of the cabinet of Prime Minister Vitaly Khan-Koysky. Kara Mehmet lost his life in the conflict with the army, but the armed struggle in Ganja district did not stop. During the Soviet period, Kara Mehmet was remembered as a national hero, streets were named after him and statues were erected in his name. In 1974, a movie named Kara Mehmet was released in the Soviet Union. On the other hand, the government was also in a deep crisis. Parliament consisted of 120 members by law, but a full cabinet was never formed throughout its existence. Many members rarely came to parliamentary meetings, and some did not even attend at all. As a result, nearly 20 parliamentary meetings were interrupted due to lack of quorum. Things got to the point where it was even decided to impose fines on those who did not attend. During this period, many negative situations such as arbitrariness, bribery, abuse, speculation, etc. occurred in state institutions. A secret agreement regarding the oil sale of Minister of Trade and Industry Mirza Esaduliev was revealed and he was replaced by Nazir Bey Yusuf Beyli. Thereupon, the cabinet of Vitaly Khan-Koysky resigned. In the early 1920s, communist organizations in Azerbaijan did not have a political unity. On February 11, 1920, a congress was held in Baku with the participation of all communist organizations, and the Azerbaijan Communist Party was established with the unity of all organizations. In the Congress decision, the main goal of the party was determined as practically preparing the workers and peasants for actions aimed at overthrowing the current government. In the last months before the overthrow, government officials had intensified their repressive measures against the Bolsheviks. Because of unrest among military units, the government relied on the police to deal with the protests. For example, Baku Police Chief Rustam Bey Mirzayev ordered the immediate detention of participants in communist rallies and demonstrations. On February 22, 1920, the printing house that published the Bolshevik newspaper New World was sealed and its employees were arrested. On March 9, the Azerbaijani Purs newspaper was closed. During this period, the government issued orders to prevent the Bolsheviks from entering Baku and to remove all dissenting people from the city. Azerbaijani Interior Minister Mustafa Bey Vakalov stated that they would not allow any Bolshevik activities to be carried out among the people and said, "We will destroy without mercy." The government was becoming increasingly brutal. On March 18, police arrested and executed Ali Bayramov, a member of the Central Committee of the Azerbaijan Communist Party. His corpse was decapitated and his body and head were dumped near a factory in one of Baku's working-class areas. The whole city knew about this murder. Minister of Internal Affairs Shafi Bey Rustambiov even denied that Bayramov was arrested. In the same month, almost the entire Ganja committee of the Communist Party was arrested. Baku was virtually blockaded from all sides, and attempts were made to prevent communists and workers from entering the city. For example, on April 7, the Baku military governor-general sent an order to strengthen military posts along the coastline and nearby islands, stating that the entry and exit ban was of extreme national importance. At the Baku Party conference on October 25, 1919, the decision to seize power was taken. The revolutionary headquarters, established by the Bolsheviks at the end of 1919 and led by Mirza David Husanov, began direct preparations for the armed uprising. Money and weapons were brought to Baku for the workers to use. After the establishment of the Soviet power in the city of Krasnovodsk, which is today called Turkmenbashi, the Bolsheviks began to buy weapons from there. In March 1920, police captured the Bolshevik headquarters in Baku and seized important documents related to the uprising. Thereupon, at an extraordinary meeting held on 2 April with the participation of the Baku Bureau of the Russian Soviet, the Communist Party of Azerbaijan and the representatives of the 11th Red Army, it was decided that the 11th Army would deliver an ultimatum to the Musavat Party. Accordingly, the Azerbaijani government would hand over power to the workers on April 27th. On April 24, the Caucasus Committee of the Russian Soviet and the Communist Party of Azerbaijan issued a decree declaring martial law in the party organization in Baku. Accordingly, it was announced that the party organization in the Baku region was immediately prepared for full war. All functions of the highest party management and command were transferred to the War Committee, which was declared the highest party body. New World newspaper, the media organ of the Central Committee of the Azerbaijan Communist Party, making headlines, "Down with Musavat's Bayaga government, long live Soviet power, long live Soviet Red Azerbaijan." While the Azerbaijani communists were preparing for an uprising, the Red Army, fighting the White Army in the North Caucasus, approached the Azerbaijani border. In March, Kirov informed the Communist Party Central Committee that he would support an uprising of workers and peasants against the Musavat government when Red Army units approached. In the spring of 1920, Soviet Russia recognized the independence of Poland, Finland and Estonia, which arose on the territory of the former Russian Empire. Recognition of Azerbaijan's independence was also among the issues discussed at that time, but many forces were fighting against the Soviet power in the lands of the collapsed empire. Anarchist Mark-Novists were active in the southeast of Ukraine. The White Guards were fighting against the Red Army in Crimea, and fighting continued in Karelia on the Finnish front. At the same time, Polish troops launched an attack on Belarus, taking Mosia and Karlinkovichi. After these developments occurred, the Bolsheviks adopted the path of solving the problems in Azerbaijan through armed uprising and military methods. The party and state leadership in Soviet Russia had the same thoughts as Karl Marx regarding the world revolution. For example, Bukharin himself used the following statements during the period in question. Every proletarian state has the right to red intervention, because the spread of the Red Army is the spread of socialism, proletarian power and revolution. Although the October Revolution was originally a Russian revolution, later, during the fight against the White Army, the revolution represented by the Soviet power spread to all parts of the former empire. This was the case throughout the Caucasus, including Azerbaijan. Simultaneously with the armed uprising in Baku, preparations for the entry of Red Army units into Azerbaijan began. On April 21, the Caucasus Front Command ordered the 11th Red Army and the Volga-Caspian Military Flotilla Command to attack Baku. The operation to capture Baku was ordered to begin on April 27th. In this process, the Azerbaijan Workers' Club was closed, its members were arrested, and the workers' weapons depots were seized by the Musavat government. In the face of this situation, Baku workers were impatiently waiting for the Soviet troops to support them. Following these developments, on April 23, the Caucasus Front Command issued a new directive, and the order was changed to the ultimate task of the 11th Army is not the capture of Baku, but the capture of all Azerbaijani lands. The Revolutionary Military Council ordered all troops to attack at dawn on April 27th. On the same night, revolutionary sailors led by the head of the Baku port, Cengiz Yildirim, disarmed the Musavat soldiers and captured the police station and ammunition depot in Bayul together with the workers. Then the workers quickly began to arm themselves and set out in trucks towards the regions in Baku. Almost everywhere, workers and students began to join the rebellion voluntarily. The rebels completely captured the military port and released all political prisoners from Bayul prison. The flags on all ships were removed and thrown into the sea and replaced by red flags. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the military fleet under the command of Cengiz Yildirim entered the Baku Bay and aimed the ship's cannons at the government and parliament buildings. This maneuver became one of the key moments of the Azerbaijani Revolution. Events in Baku developed rapidly. During the day, the rebels had captured the train station, post office, telegraph office, radio station, and several police stations. Since the most important transportation and communication facilities were under the control of the workers, the government was completely isolated from the outside world, and this prevented the Musavatist military units in the region from helping them. During the rebellion, many military units sided with the Bolsheviks and took over many state institutions. War Minister Samet Bey Mamandrov understood that the situation in Baku was hopeless, and taking into account that the 11th Red Army units had crossed the border after the uprising, he advised the government to surrender. The Bolshevik delegation led by the Azerbaijan Communist Party, headed by Hamid Sultanov, gave an ultimatum to the parliament and the government to hand over power to the workers within 12 hours. At PM, the ships of the Caspian military fleet lined up on the roadside and raised red flags. Soviet Azerbaijan Red Fleet commander Cengiz Yildirim gave another ultimatum and stated that fire would be opened if they did not surrender power. Thereupon, the government members held an emergency meeting at 20:45 to hand over power. Before the issue was discussed, War Minister Mamandrov informed the deputies that the military situation was hopeless. Azerbaijani revolutionary Samdur Amaloglu describes this meeting in his memories as follows. None of the members had the courage to start resistance against the Soviets. No one had the courage to destroy the city and shed the blood of innocents in vain. There wasn't a drop of blood. Why? Because there was a change in power. Instead of parasitic supporters, defenders of workers' and peasants' interests would come to power. Who would dare to resist? A vote was held around 23 o'clock at night, and then the parliament adopted by majority vote the decision to transfer power to the Bolsheviks. At around 2 o'clock in the morning on April 28, 1920, the parliament was officially dissolved. The Azerbaijan Communist Party sent a telegram to Lenin, informing him that the Musavat party government had been overthrown and that the only authorized body in the country was the Azerbaijan Provisional Revolutionary Committee. The telegram stated that this provisional government would be in power until the Congress of Soviets of Peasants, Workers and Soldiers deputies convened. The new government sent the following telegram to Soviet Russia. Moscow, Lenin. By the will of the revolutionary proletariat of the mountains, the Provisional Military Revolutionary Committee of the independent Azerbaijan Soviet Republic came to power. Workers and peasants of Baku and Azerbaijan declare the former Musavat government a traitor to the people and an enemy of the country's independence. All relations with the Allied powers and other enemies of Soviet Russia were severed. Unable to resist the onslaught of the combined gangs of internal and external counter-revolution on its own, Azerbaijan calls on the Russian Soviet government to join a fraternal alliance for the common struggle against world imperialism and demands that it begin this struggle immediately. Provide assistance by sending Red Army units. On April 28, 1920, armoured trains of the Red Army entered Azerbaijan. On April 29, Pravda newspaper wrote that Soviet power was established in Baku. From the first days of the establishment of the Soviet power, local revolutionary governments began to be formed in villages and cities. Yes, comrades, I wanted to give you information about the historical process during the Sovietization of Azerbaijan. I hope you liked it. I hope this information about the history of Azerbaijan attracted your attention and we received a like from you for the video. Revolutionary processes developed differently and uniquely in the states that formed the Soviet Union. The Sovietization process, especially in the Caucasus, contains important historical periods. I wanted to explain these processes to you in full detail. Soviet experiences created by the working classes have found a place in Azerbaijan, as in many parts of the world. If you have anything you would like to add on the subject, write it in the comments. Let's discuss the historical process together and take a look at new ideas. On the Soviet Journey channel, I publish many videos about the Soviets and world socialist movements. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel to take a look at our content on the subject and follow us. Goodbye for now. Stay in solidarity.